Maya wiped down the last table in the corner of the restaurant, her shoulders aching from the long shift. The clock on the wall showed 11:30 at night, and she still had another hour before closing time. She had been working at this upscale restaurant for 3 months now, ever since she moved to the city with nothing but a worn suitcase and dreams that felt heavier than the bag itself. The restaurant was called the Golden Terrace, and it sat on the 20th floor of a luxury hotel. Through the massive windows, the city lights sparkled like scattered diamonds. Maya often paused to look at that view, imagining what life must be like for the people who could afford to eat here without checking their bank accounts first. She earned barely enough to pay rent for her tiny studio apartment in the suburbs, where the walls were thin and the heater only worked half the time. Tonight was particularly busy. A private event was being held in the main dining area. Maya caught glimpses of men in expensive suits and women in elegant dresses as she moved between the kitchen and the service area. She heard laughter and the clinking of champagne glasses. Her manager, Mr. Roberts, had specifically told her to stay in the back section and not disturb the guests unless called upon. Maya didn't mind. She preferred staying invisible anyway. Back home in her small town, everyone knew her story. Everyone knew about the scholarship she lost, the music school that rejected her application, and the father who spent their savings on his gambling addiction before disappearing completely. Her mother had died when Maya was 12, leaving her with only one precious gift, an old upright piano and the ability to play it beautifully. That piano was gone now, sold to pay debts. Maya hadn't touched a piano in almost 2 years, and the silence of those missing keys haunted her dreams. Music had been everything to her once. She had won competitions as a child, performed at local events, and teachers had told her she had a rare gift. But gifts didn't pay bills, and dreams didn't fill empty stomachs. She carried a tray of dirty dishes back to the kitchen when she heard Mr. Roberts calling her name. His voice had an edge of nervousness that made her walk faster. When she found him near the private dining room, his face was flushed and he was adjusting his tie repeatedly. "Maya, I need you to do something," he said in a low voice. The entertainment for tonight's event canceled at the last minute. The pianist had a family emergency. These are very important guests, and Mr. Chen, the host, is not happy about it. Maya nodded, unsure why he was telling her this. "What do you need me to do, sir?" Mr. Roberts glanced toward the dining room, then back at her. One of the guests suggested they find someone from the staff to play. They think it would be amusing. The owner agreed because he doesn't want to disappoint Mr. Chen. "Can you play piano? Even just a little?" Maya felt her heart skip. Her hands, rough from washing dishes and carrying heavy trays, suddenly felt cold. I used to play. A long time ago. Perfect. They just need someone to sit there and play something. Anything, it doesn't have to be fancy." Mr. Roberts looked relieved. "Just for 30 minutes. Please, Maya. If this event goes badly, it affects all of us." Maya wanted to refuse. The thought of sitting at a piano in front of wealthy strangers who expected to be entertained by someone they probably saw as a joke made her stomach turn. But she also needed this job desperately. Refusing might mean losing it, and she couldn't afford that. "Okay," she whispered. "I'll do it." Mr. Roberts smiled and patted her shoulder. "Good girl. Just do your best. They're not expecting much anyway." Those words stung more than he probably intended. Maya followed him toward the private dining room, and with each step her anxiety grew. She hadn't performed in front of anyone since the last competition she entered 3 years ago, where she placed second and realized second place didn't earn scholarships or opportunities. It just earned polite applause and then silence. When they entered the room, conversations paused. Maya kept her eyes down, aware of how she must look in her plain black waitress uniform, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, no makeup on her tired face. The room was magnificent, with crystal chandeliers and tables decorated with white roses. About 30 people sat around a long table, and at the head sat a man in his 60s with sharp eyes and an expression that revealed nothing. That must be Mr. Chen, Maya thought. Next to him sat a younger man, perhaps in his 30s, wearing an immaculately tailored suit. He was looking at his phone, barely acknowledging the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Mr. Roberts announced with forced cheerfulness, "we have found someone to provide your musical entertainment for the evening. This is Maya, one of our staff members." A few people smiled politely. Others barely glanced up from their conversations. One woman in a red dress leaned toward her companion and whispered something that made them both laugh quietly. Maya felt heat rise to her cheeks but kept her expression neutral. Mr. Roberts gestured toward a beautiful grand piano positioned near the windows. "Whenever you're ready, Maya." She walked to the piano, her legs feeling unsteady. The bench was plush, covered in velvet that probably cost more than her monthly rent. She sat down and stared at the keys, white and black, perfectly aligned, waiting. Her hands hovered above them, trembling slightly. For a moment, she couldn't move. The last time she had played for an audience, it was in a small community center with proud parents and encouraging teachers. This was different. These people didn't care about her or her music. She was a novelty, a temporary distraction between courses. Behind her, someone cleared their throat impatiently. Maya took a deep breath and placed her fingers on the keys. They felt cool and smooth, familiar despite the years of absence. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the room and the people and the weight of their expectations. Then she began to play. The piece that flowed from her fingers was one she had learned as a teenager, a classical composition by Chopin. It started softly, gently, like rain beginning to fall. Her fingers moved across the keys with muscle memory she didn't know she still possessed. The notes filled the room, delicate and pure, and gradually the conversations around the table faded into silence. Maya didn't notice. She was somewhere else now, back in her mother's small living room, playing while her mother listened with closed eyes and a peaceful smile. She was in that place where music lived, where nothing else mattered except the connection between heart and hands and sound. The music shifted, growing more intense, more passionate. Maya's fingers danced across the keys with increasing confidence. The piece demanded emotion, and she gave it everything she had buried inside for the past 2 years. Every disappointment, every loss, every moment of struggling to survive in a city that felt too big and too cold poured into the notes. The piano responded to her touch like an old friend welcoming her home. She moved from Chopin into something else, a piece she had composed herself years ago but never showed anyone. It had no name, just feelings translated into melody. It spoke of loneliness and hope intertwined, of dreams that refused to die even when everything else fell apart. Her eyes remained closed as she played, unaware that the entire room had fallen completely silent. At the head of the table, Richard Chen set down his wine glass carefully. He had been in the middle of discussing a business deal when the girl started playing. His first instinct was to ignore the background music and continue his conversation. After all, this was meant to be a joke, something to fill the awkward gap left by the canceled pianist. But something in the sound made him pause. Richard had grown up surrounded by music. His mother had been a concert pianist before she married his father and gave up her career to raise him. She had died 5 years ago and he still missed her every day. She used to play for him when he couldn't sleep, when business stress overwhelmed him, when the world felt too heavy. The music this young woman was playing reminded him of his mother's touch on the keys. That same emotional honesty, that same willingness to be vulnerable through sound. Next to Richard, his son David looked up from his phone for the first time all evening. David had inherited his grandfather's business mind, but none of his grandmother's artistic soul. He found classical music boring and couldn't understand his father's attachment to it. But even he noticed something different about this performance. The girl at the piano wasn't just playing notes. She was telling a story, and despite himself, he wanted to hear how it ended. Around the table, conversations had died completely. A woman in the red dress who had laughed earlier now sat with her hand over her mouth, her eyes glistening with unexpected tears. She didn't know why this music was affecting her so strongly. Perhaps it reminded her of her own abandoned dreams, the painting career she gave up to marry wealthy, the creative spark she buried under years of charity galas and social obligations. The businessman beside her, usually so confident and loud, found himself thinking about his daughter who had begged him to let her study music instead of business. He had refused, insisting she follow a practical path. She had obeyed and now worked at his company, successful but hollow-eyed and joyless. He wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. Maya played on, unaware of the effect she was having. The music flowed through her like a river that had been dammed too long, finally breaking free. She moved into another piece, this one more melancholic, slower. It was a composition by Rachmaninoff, one that spoke of longing and lost love. Her mother used to say that Rachmaninoff wrote music for people who understood sadness, but refused to surrender to it. Richard felt something crack inside his chest. This was the piece his mother had played at her final public performance before she retired. He remembered sitting in the audience as a young boy, watching her command the stage with grace and power. After that concert, she had told him that music was the language of the soul, and only those who dared to open their hearts completely could speak it fluently. This girl, this waitress in a borrowed moment of glory, was speaking that language perfectly. A tear rolled down Richard's cheek, surprising him. He never cried in public. He had built an empire worth billions by being tough, calculating and emotionless when necessary. But music had always been his weakness, the one thing that could bypass all his defenses and reach the frightened child still living somewhere inside the powerful man. The piece reached its climax, the notes swelling and cascading like waves against a shore. Maya's whole body moved with the music now, swaying gently, her face a portrait of pure concentration and feeling. Her fingers flew across the keys, coaxing out sounds that seemed impossible from a single instrument. The piano sang and wept and soared under her touch. Then gradually the music began to quiet. It returned to the gentle whisper it had started with, like a storm passing and leaving behind peaceful rain. The final notes hung in the air, delicate and precious, before fading into silence. Maya lifted her hands from the keys and opened her eyes. For a moment she had forgotten where she was. The spell of the music still wrapped around her like a cocoon. Then reality crashed back. She was sitting at a piano in front of 30 wealthy strangers who had expected to be mildly amused by a struggling waitress attempting to play. She turned slowly on the bench, afraid of what she would see. Would they be laughing, sneering? Had she made a fool of herself? Instead, she found every eye in the room fixed on her. The silence was absolute. The woman in the red dress had tears streaming down her face, not bothering to wipe them away. Several other people looked equally moved, their expressions soft and vulnerable. And at the head of the table, the intimidating Mr. Chen was openly crying, not trying to hide it or excuse it. Maya felt panic rising. Had she done something wrong? Had her playing been so terrible that it made people cry for the wrong reasons? Then Mr. Chen stood up. His movement broke the spell, and suddenly the room erupted in applause. It wasn't polite clapping. It was thunderous, genuine, the kind of applause usually reserved for world-renowned performers at concert halls. People rose to their feet, still clapping, some of them wiping their eyes. Maya sat frozen, unable to process what was happening. She had played for these people as a joke, as entertainment they weren't supposed to take seriously. But they were taking it very seriously indeed. Mr. Chen walked toward her and the crowd quieted again. Maya stood quickly, nervously smoothing down her uniform. Up close, she could see that his eyes were red from crying, and there was an expression on his face she couldn't quite read. Sadness, gratitude, recognition. "What is your name?" he asked quietly. His voice was rough with emotion. "Maya, sir. Maya Santos." Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Maya Santos," he repeated, as if committing it to memory. "Where did you learn to play like that?" She didn't know how to answer. The true answer was too long, too complicated, too painful. "My mother taught me when I was young, sir. I studied for many years. And now you work here as a waitress?" There was no judgment in his tone, only genuine curiosity and something else. Perhaps sadness. Maya nodded, feeling ashamed without quite knowing why. "Yes, sir. I needed a job when I moved to the city." Mr. Chen studied her face for a long moment. Then he turned to the room and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have just witnessed something extraordinary. This young woman has a gift that should not be wasted serving food and cleaning tables." The room murmured in agreement. Maya felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the attention and the praise. She wasn't used to being seen, let alone celebrated. For months she had made herself small, invisible, just another struggling person trying to survive in an indifferent city. Now all these important people were looking at her like she mattered, and she didn't know how to handle it. Mr. Roberts appeared at the edge of the room, his face a mixture of shock and nervous hope. He had expected Maya to play a simple tune, maybe some background music that people would politely ignore. He hadn't expected this. The most powerful people in the city were standing in his restaurant, moved to tears by one of his waitresses. He wasn't sure if this was wonderful or terrifying for his career. Richard Chen reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. He held it out to Maya with steady hands, though his eyes still glistened with unshed tears. "Miss Santos, I would like to speak with you tomorrow. Please come to this address at 10 in the morning." We have much to discuss. Maya took the card with trembling fingers. The paper was thick and expensive, embossed with golden letters that spelled out Chen Enterprises and an address in the most prestigious business district of the city. She had walked past that building before, a gleaming tower that seemed to touch the clouds, and never imagined she would have any reason to enter it. I have work tomorrow, sir," she said hesitantly, looking toward Mr. Roberts. Richard followed her gaze and then addressed the restaurant manager with the casual authority of someone used to being obeyed. "I'm sure arrangements can be made." "This is important." Mr. Roberts nodded so quickly his head looked like it might fall off. "Of course, Mr. Chen. Maya, you can take the morning off." "No problem at all." "Thank you," Maya whispered, still not quite believing any of this was real. Richard returned to his seat, but the atmosphere in the room had completely changed. People who had barely noticed Maya when she entered now wanted to speak with her. They approached her one by one, shaking her hand, telling her how beautiful her playing had been, how it had touched them in ways they couldn't quite explain. The woman in the red dress, whose name Maya learned was Patricia Hartwell, held her hand for a long moment. "My dear, you made me remember who I used to be before I forgot. That's a rare gift." Her voice was thick with emotion and her grip was almost desperate, as if Maya represented something precious she had lost. A younger man, perhaps in his late 20s, introduced himself as James Park, a music producer. He gave her his card too and told her to call him. "I work with concert halls and recording studios. Someone with your talent shouldn't be hidden away. The world needs to hear you play." Maya collected several business cards that evening, each one representing a possibility she had stopped allowing herself to imagine. But it was Richard Chen's card that felt heaviest in her pocket, weighted with promise and uncertainty in equal measure. When the event finally ended and the guests departed, Maya returned to her duties in a daze. She wiped tables and organized the chairs, her mind replaying everything that had happened. Part of her wondered if she had dreamed it all. Maybe she had fallen asleep during her break and imagined the whole thing. But the business cards in her pocket were real, and so was the way her fingers still tingled from touching the piano keys after so long. Mr. Roberts found her before she left. His earlier nervousness had transformed into an almost paternal pride. "Maya, I had no idea you could play like that. If I had known, I would have... Well, I don't know what I would have done differently, but something." He paused, searching for words. "Whatever Mr. Chen wants to discuss tomorrow, I hope it's good for you. You deserve something good." His kindness surprised her. Maya had always thought of him as just a boss, someone who gave her orders and checked her work. She hadn't realized he saw her as a person with potential beyond serving food. "Thank you, Mr. Roberts, I'm still not sure what just happened." "Something important," he said firmly. "Now go home and get some rest. Tomorrow might change your life." Maya left the restaurant and walked to the subway station in the cold night air. The city looked different somehow, as if playing the piano had shifted something in her perception. The lights seemed brighter, the sounds less harsh. Or maybe she was just feeling something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. Hope. Her apartment was dark and cold when she arrived. She turned on the small heater and sat on her narrow bed, still wearing her coat. She pulled out Richard Chen's business card and stared at it. The man was a billionaire, she had learned from whispers among the restaurant staff. He owned hotels, real estate companies, investment firms. He was the kind of person who existed in a different world from hers, a world of power and privilege she could barely imagine. Why would someone like that care about a waitress who could play piano? There were thousands of talented musicians in the city, people with proper training and connections and opportunities. What made her special? Maya thought about the way he had cried while listening to her play. That wasn't fake. Whatever he had felt, it had been real and deep. The music had reached him in some profound way, had opened a door to emotions he usually kept locked away. Her mother used to say that music was magic, because it could make strangers feel connected, could turn separate hearts into one beating rhythm. Maya had forgotten that truth in her struggle to survive. She had forgotten that she possessed something valuable, something that couldn't be measured in money or security but was precious nonetheless. She lay down on her bed without changing clothes, exhausted but unable to sleep. Her mind raced with possibilities and fears. What would Richard Chen want to discuss? Would he offer her some kind of job? Or was this just a rich man's whim? a momentary impulse that would evaporate by morning. The hours crawled by slowly. Maya watched the digital clock on her phone count the minutes, each one feeling longer than the last. At 5 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and took a shower. She washed away the smell of the restaurant, the grease and food and exhaustion that clung to her skin. Looking through her closet, she realized she had nothing appropriate to wear to meet a billionaire. Her wardrobe consisted of work uniforms, cheap jeans, and a few worn sweaters. Finally, she chose her best pair of black pants and a simple white blouse, both slightly faded from too many washings. It wasn't impressive, but it was clean and neat. It would have to be enough. Maya arrived at the Chen Enterprises building at 9:30, too nervous to risk being late. The tower was even more intimidating up close, all glass and steel reaching toward the sky. She stood outside for several minutes, gathering courage, watching important-looking people in expensive suits hurry through the revolving doors. Finally, she took a deep breath and entered. The lobby was enormous, with marble floors so shiny she could see her reflection in them. A massive crystal chandelier hung from the ceiling, and modern art pieces decorated the walls. Everything screamed wealth and power. Maya approached the reception desk, where a polished young woman sat behind a computer screen. The receptionist looked up with a professional smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She took in Maya's simple outfit and modest appearance with one swift glance, and her smile became slightly cooler. "Can I help you?" The words were polite, but the tone suggested doubt that Maya belonged there. "I have an appointment with Mr. Chen at 10 o'clock. My name is Maya Santos." She tried to sound confident, but her voice betrayed her nervousness. The receptionist's eyebrows rose slightly, clearly surprised. She typed something into her computer. Then her expression changed from skepticism to sudden attention. "Oh yes, Miss Santos. You're on Mr. Chen's personal calendar. Please have a seat, and someone will come for you shortly." Maya sat in one of the leather chairs in the waiting area, feeling out of place among the executives and business people who passed through the lobby. Everyone moved with purpose and confidence, their expensive shoes clicking against the marble floors. She clutched her small purse in her lap and tried not to fidget. At exactly 10 o'clock, a young man in a sharp suit appeared. "Miss Santos, I'm Kevin, Mr. Chen's assistant. Please follow me." They entered an elevator with mirrors on all sides. Maya caught sight of herself from multiple angles and felt even more self-conscious. Next to Kevin's tailored perfection, she looked like exactly what she was. A working-class girl trying to navigate a world that wasn't built for people like her. The elevator climbed smoothly, the numbers on the display counting up to the 40th floor. When the doors opened, Maya stepped into a corridor lined with original paintings and sculptures. Everything about this space was designed to remind visitors that they were in the presence of serious wealth and power. Kevin led her to a set of double doors at the end of the hall. He knocked once, then opened them, gesturing for Maya to enter. "Mr. Chen is expecting you." The office was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the entire city. Maya could see for miles in every direction, the buildings below looking like toys from this height. The office itself was furnished with modern elegance, all clean lines and expensive materials. And there, behind a massive desk, sat Richard Chen. He stood when she entered, and Maya noticed he looked different in the daylight. Less intimidating, more tired. There were lines around his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept much either. He gestured to a seating area by the windows away from the formal desk. "Please, Miss Santos, sit. Would you like coffee, tea?" His manner was courteous but not condescending, treating her like a guest rather than someone beneath his station. "Water would be nice." "Thank you." Maya's mouth felt dry. Kevin brought her a glass of water in crystal so clear it seemed almost invisible, then excused himself, closing the doors behind him. Maya and Richard were alone in the vast office. Richard settled into the chair across from her, studying her face with the same intense attention he had shown the previous night. "I want to thank you for coming. I know this must be confusing for you." "A little," Maya admitted. "I'm not sure why you wanted to see me." "Because of what you did last night," Richard said simply. "You moved me in a way I haven't been moved in years. Your playing was extraordinary, but more than that, it was honest. You weren't performing for us. You were playing for yourself from your heart, and we were privileged to witness it." Maya didn't know what to say. She had played like that because she hadn't known any other way to play, not because she was trying to impress anyone. Richard continued, I want to know your story. Maya, how does someone with your talent end up working as a waitress? What happened? The question opened a door Maya had kept firmly closed for a long time. But something about Richard's genuine interest, the way he had cried listening to her music, made her feel safe enough to answer honestly. She told him everything. About her mother, who had been her first teacher, who had sacrificed so much to pay for Maya's piano lessons even when money was tight. About winning local competitions as a child and dreaming of becoming a concert pianist. About her father's gambling addiction that destroyed their family's savings. About applying for a scholarship to a prestigious music conservatory and being rejected. About her father disappearing and leaving her with debts she couldn't pay. About selling her mother's piano, the only thing she had left of her just to survive. About moving to the city with nothing, hoping to find work and maybe someday save enough money to continue her music education. As she spoke, tears she had held back for years began to fall. She tried to wipe them away, embarrassed to be crying in front of this powerful man, but they kept coming. The story poured out of her like the music had poured out the night before, unstoppable and raw. Richard listened without interrupting, his expression growing more pained with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the city below. My mother was a pianist, he finally said, one of the best in her generation. She could have had an international career, performed in all the great concert halls of the world. But she chose to marry my father instead, to help him build his business empire. She gave up her music for him. He paused, his jaw tightening. My father never appreciated what she sacrificed. He thought music was a hobby, something frivolous. He never understood that when she gave up performing, she gave up part of her soul. She continued to play at home, teaching me, but it wasn't the same. I watched her dreams wither away year by year. Richard turned to look at Maya directly. Before she died, she made me promise something. She asked me to never let talent be wasted because of circumstances beyond someone's control. She said that if I ever had the power to help someone pursue their music, I should do it without hesitation. He smiled sadly. I've been waiting 5 years for the right person to honor that promise. Last night I found her. Maya's heart was pounding. What do you mean? I want to sponsor your musical education, Richard said plainly. Full scholarship to any conservatory or music school you choose. Living expenses covered. Everything you need to develop your talent properly. All I ask in return is that you take it seriously, that you work hard, and that you never let circumstances force you to give up your gift again. Maya stared at him, unable to process what she was hearing. It was too much, too impossible. People like her didn't get offers like this. There had to be a catch, some hidden condition that would make it all disappear. I don't understand, she whispered. Why would you do this for me? You don't even know me. Because my mother can't do it herself anymore, and I promised her I would. Because talent like yours deserves to be nurtured, not buried under the weight of survival. Because last night, for the first time since she died, I heard music that made me feel the way she used to make me feel when she played. That's worth everything to me. Maya felt like she was in a dream. The kind of dream where everything you've ever wanted appears before you. But you're terrified to reach for it because touching it might make it vanish. Her hands trembled as she set down her water glass, afraid she might drop it. This is too much, she said, her voice breaking. I can't accept something like this. It's too generous. I haven't earned it. Richard leaned forward, his expression intense but kind. Maya, you've earned it through every hour you spent practicing as a child when other kids were playing. Through every sacrifice your mother made to give you lessons. Through the fact that even after losing everything, even after being forced to set aside your music for 2 years, you can still sit at a piano and play with such beauty and emotion that you bring a room full of strangers to tears. That's not luck. That's dedication and genuine talent. But what if I fail? The question came out small and scared. What if I'm not good enough for a real conservatory? What if I've been away from music too long and can't catch up? Then you'll work harder until you can, Richard said simply. Failure is only permanent if you let it be. My mother used to tell me that the only true failure in art is not trying at all. Everything else is just practice. Maya thought about her mother, who had died believing that Maya would become the pianist she herself could never be. Her mother had poured all her hopes and dreams into teaching Maya, into nurturing that talent, into believing that music could lift them out of poverty and struggle. She had died before seeing any of those dreams fulfilled. If I say yes, Maya began slowly, I want to be clear that I don't know how I'll ever repay you. I don't come from money. I don't have connections. I can't offer you anything in return. I'm not asking for anything in return, Richard replied. Except perhaps that someday, if you're in a position to help another struggling artist, you'll remember this moment and pay it forward. That's how my mother would want it. The simplicity of his request made Maya's eyes fill with tears again. She had spent so long in survival mode, where every transaction had a cost, where nothing came without strings attached. The idea that someone would help her purely out of generosity and the memory of someone they loved felt almost impossible to believe. I need to think about this, Maya said, even though part of her wanted to say yes immediately. The cautious part of her, the part that had learned not to trust in good fortune, needed time to examine this gift for hidden traps. Richard nodded, understanding. Of course. Take whatever time you need. But Maya, I want you to know something. The world is full of talented people who never get the chance to develop their gifts because circumstances work against them. When opportunity arrives, it rarely announces itself politely and waits for you to be ready. Sometimes you have to be brave enough to grab it with both hands, even if you're terrified. He stood and walked to his desk, retrieving a folder. These are applications for 3 of the best music conservatories in the country. I took the liberty of having my staff prepare them. The conservatory here in the city, the one in New York, and one in Boston. All 3 are excellent. Look them over. Think about which one appeals to you most. If you decide to accept my offer, we can have the application submitted by the end of the week. Maya took the folder with shaking hands. The weight of it felt significant, like she was holding the physical representation of a different future. What if they don't accept me? With your talent and a strong audition, they will, Richard said confidently. I've already spoken with contacts at each institution. They're prepared to hear you play. The decision will be yours based on where you feel you'd thrive best. He walked her to the door, his hand briefly touching her shoulder in a gesture that felt almost fatherly. Maya, I know this is overwhelming, but sometimes life gives us a second chance at the dreams we thought we'd lost. Don't be so afraid of disappointment that you turn away from possibility. Kevin appeared to escort her back to the elevator. As Maya rode down from the 40th floor, clutching the folder against her chest, she felt like she was descending from a cloud back to earth. The marble lobby, so intimidating on her way in, now seemed like a portal between 2 different worlds. She stood on the street outside the building, people rushing past her on all sides, and tried to ground herself in reality. Her phone buzzed. A text from Mr. Roberts asking how the meeting went. Maya realized she had no idea how to answer. How did you explain that your entire life had just been offered a chance to transform? How did you put into words that a stranger's generosity might redeem years of loss and struggle? She walked for hours through the city, the folder tucked safely in her bag. She found herself in a park, sitting on a bench watching children play while their parents relaxed nearby. Normal people living normal lives, probably never experiencing the kind of extremes she had known. The depths of poverty and loss, and now potentially, the heights of unexpected fortune. Maya pulled out the applications and read through them carefully. Each conservatory had an impressive history, notable faculty, successful alumni. Any one of them would have been beyond her wildest dreams just 24 hours ago. Now she was being asked to choose between them. The conservatory in the city was the most practical option. She could stay in her apartment, keep some connection to the life she knew. The one in New York was the most prestigious, famous for producing world-class performers. The Boston school was smaller but known for its focus on composition as well as performance. As she read, Maya felt something shifting inside her. The fear and disbelief were still there, but underneath them, something else was growing. A tiny flame of hope and excitement that she hadn't felt in years. The possibility that she could return to music, not as a hobby or a memory, but as the center of her life again. She thought about what Richard had said about his mother, about sacrificed dreams and wasted talent. She thought about her own mother, who had died young and poor but had still found joy in teaching Maya to play. Music had been their bridge, their shared language, their way of connecting when words weren't enough. Saying yes to this opportunity wouldn't just be for herself. It would be honoring both of their memories, all the dreams that had seemed to die with them. It would be proof that their sacrifices and beliefs hadn't been meaningless. Maya returned to her tiny apartment as the sun was setting. The space looked even smaller and shabbier after spending time in Richard Chen's magnificent office, but it was hers. She had worked hard for it, survived in it, learned to be strong within its thin walls. She made herself tea and sat at her small table with the applications spread before her. With a pen in hand, she began filling out the first one. Each question she answered felt like a small act of courage. What were her musical influences? What did she hope to achieve through advanced study? Why did she believe she deserved this opportunity? Writing her answers, Maya discovered she had more to say than she expected. The years of silence hadn't erased her passion for music or her understanding of why it mattered. If anything, the time away had deepened her appreciation for what she had lost. She wrote about how music was a language that transcended words, how it could express emotions too complex for speech, how it connected people across all boundaries of culture and class. She worked late into the night, fueled by tea and determination. By the time she finished the first application, dawn was breaking outside her window. She felt exhausted but also strangely energized, as if she had been asleep for 2 years and was finally waking up. Over the next 3 days, Maya completed all 3 applications. She also did something she hadn't done in years. She researched piano practice spaces in the city. If she was going to audition for these conservatories, she needed to practice seriously, and she couldn't do that without an actual piano. She found a small music studio that rented practice rooms by the hour. The rates weren't cheap, but she calculated that if she cut back on everything else, lived even more frugally than she already did, she could afford 4 hours a week. It wasn't much, but it was something. The first time she sat down in one of those practice rooms facing a somewhat battered upright piano, Maya felt a rush of emotion so strong it almost knocked her over. The smell of old wood and sheet music, the feel of the worn keys under her fingers, the sight of her own reflection in the piano's polished surface. It all felt like coming home after a long, painful exile. She started with scales and basic exercises, her fingers stiff and clumsy at first. 2 years away from regular practice had taken their toll, but gradually muscle memory kicked in. Her fingers remembered patterns they had learned as a child. The music started to flow more naturally. Maya practiced the pieces she would need for her auditions. Conservatories expected a diverse repertoire, something Baroque, something romantic, something modern. She chose Bach's Goldberg Variations for Baroque, one of Chopin's ballads for romantic, and a contemporary piece by a living composer for modern. Each practice session revealed how much work she needed to do. There were passages she couldn't play cleanly, dynamics she couldn't control, interpretations that felt shallow. But there was also progress. Every hour she spent with the piano brought back more of what she had lost. Meanwhile, Richard Chen was true to his word. His assistant Kevin contacted Maya to arrange her auditions. The conservatories had been notified and were preparing slots for her to play. Kevin also mentioned that Mr. Chen wanted to provide Maya with something he called proper preparation. When she asked what that meant, Kevin simply said someone would contact her, that someone turned out to be Elena Volkov, a retired concert pianist who had performed all over the world before settling in the city to teach. Maya recognized her name immediately. Elena had been a legend, famous for her technical precision and emotional depth. Having her as a teacher was something Maya had never dreamed possible. Their first meeting was at Elena's apartment, a beautiful space filled with books, artwork, and 2 grand pianos positioned facing each other. Elena herself was in her 70s, tiny and elegant with sharp eyes that seemed to see through any pretense. "Play for me," Elena commanded without preamble, gesturing to one of the pianos. "The Chopin ballade you're preparing for your audition." Nervous, Maya sat and began to play. She hadn't even finished the first page before Elena stopped her. "No, no, no. You're playing the notes, but you're not understanding them. Chopin isn't about perfection. He's about poetry, about the things we feel but cannot say. Again, and this time, forget the piano exists. Think only about what the music means to you." They worked for 3 hours that first session. Elena was demanding, sometimes harsh but also deeply insightful. She showed Maya how a single phrase could be shaped dozens of different ways, how silence could be as important as sound, how the pedal could color the music like paint on a canvas. "You have natural talent," Elena told her as the session ended. "But talent alone means nothing without discipline and understanding. The piano doesn't care about your circumstances or your story. It only cares whether you're willing to serve the music honestly. Maya left that first lesson feeling simultaneously humbled and inspired. Elena had shown her how much she still had to learn, but also that learning was possible. With the right guidance, she could become the musician she had always dreamed of being. Over the following weeks, Maya's life fell into a new rhythm. She continued working at the restaurant, but Mr. Roberts had been kind enough to adjust her schedule so she could attend lessons with Elena twice a week. She practiced every day she could afford the studio rental, sometimes going without meals to save money for just one more hour with the piano. Her fingers developed calluses again. Her back ached from sitting at the piano bench. She dreamed about music at night, waking with melodies playing in her head. It was exhausting and demanding and sometimes frustrating. It was also the happiest she had been in years. Elena pushed her relentlessly, never satisfied, always demanding more, but Maya began to hear the difference in her playing. The music was becoming more confident, more nuanced, more alive. She wasn't just hitting the right notes anymore. She was telling stories through sound. The auditions were scheduled for early spring. Maya would play for each conservatory's admissions panel, and they would decide whether to accept her. Richard had assured her that the scholarship would follow wherever she chose to go, but she still had to prove she was worthy of admission. As the date approached, Maya's anxiety grew. What if she froze during the audition? What if her playing wasn't good enough? What if this entire opportunity slipped through her fingers because she made one mistake? Elena seemed to sense her fear. During their last lesson before the first audition, the older woman sat beside Maya on the piano bench. "Let me tell you something about performing," Elena said. "Everyone makes mistakes. Even the greatest pianists sometimes hit wrong notes. But that's not what the audience remembers. They remember how you made them feel. They remember whether you connected with them through the music." She put her weathered hand over Maya's young one. "You already know how to do this. You did it that night at the restaurant when you moved Richard Chen to tears. You weren't trying to be perfect. You were just being honest. That's what real musicianship is. So when you walk into that audition room, don't think about impressing anyone. Just play from your heart the way you always have. The rest will take care of itself." The morning of her first audition arrived cold and gray. Maya woke before sunrise, too nervous to sleep. She showered, dressed in the one professional outfit she owned, a simple black dress Elena had helped her choose, and stared at herself in the bathroom mirror. She looked different than she had 3 months ago. Thinner, because she had been skipping meals to afford practice time. More tired, because she was working and practicing and studying with Elena all at once, but also more alive. There was a light in her eyes that had been missing for years. The conservatory auditions took place in a grand recital hall that made Maya feel small and insignificant. The stage was vast, with a concert grand piano positioned at its center under bright lights. The admissions panel sat in the darkened auditorium, their faces barely visible. She could make out 5 or 6 people, their postures neutral, their expressions unreadable. A voice came from the darkness. "Whenever you're ready, Miss Santos." Maya walked to the piano, her footsteps echoing on the wooden stage. She adjusted the bench, positioned her hands, and took one deep breath. Then she began to play. The Bach came first. It required precision and clarity, each voice in the counterpoint needing to be distinct yet harmonious. Maya focused on the architecture of the piece, the way Bach built cathedrals out of notes. Her fingers moved with confidence she hadn't felt before, trusting the hours of practice to carry her through. Next was the Chopin Ballade. This was where emotion mattered most, where she needed to reach beyond technique into something deeper. Maya thought about everything that had brought her to this moment: her mother's sacrifice, her father's betrayal, the years of struggle, Richard Chen's unexpected generosity, Elena's demanding instruction. All of it poured into the music. The ballade swelled and retreated like ocean waves, passionate and melancholic and hopeful all at once. Finally, the contemporary piece. It was challenging, full of unexpected harmonies and complex rhythms that pushed the boundaries of traditional piano music. Maya had struggled with it at first, finding it almost ugly compared to the classical beauty of Bach and Chopin. But Elena had taught her to hear the beauty in dissonance, to appreciate how modern composers were searching for new ways to express truth in a complicated world. When the final note faded into silence, Maya sat still for a moment, her hands resting on the keys. Then she stood and faced the panel in the darkness. "Thank you, Miss Santos," the same voice said. "We'll notify you of our decision within 2 weeks." She left the stage with no idea whether she had succeeded or failed. The panel had given nothing away, no smiles or frowns, no indication of what they thought. She had simply done her best and now had to wait for judgment. The other 2 auditions followed in the next week, each one similar yet different. Different panels, different performance halls, different atmospheres. But Maya played the same pieces each time, letting the music speak for itself, trying to connect with whoever was listening even if she couldn't see their faces. The waiting period was torture. Maya continued working at the restaurant, practicing when she could, trying not to obsess over every moment of her auditions. Had she played too fast, too slow? Had her interpretation been too unconventional? Had she hit any wrong notes without realizing it? Elena told her to stop worrying. What's done is done. The music you played was honest and skilled. If they don't accept you, it's their loss, not yours. You'll find another path. But Maya knew that another path might not exist. This opportunity with Richard Chen was unique, unlikely ever to be repeated. If all 3 conservatories rejected her, she would be back where she started. A waitress with dreams but no realistic way to achieve them. 2 weeks after her final audition, the first letter arrived. It was from the New York Conservatory, the most prestigious of the 3. Maya held the envelope in her shaking hands for several minutes before she could bring herself to open it. The letter began formally, thanking her for her audition. Then, "We are pleased to offer you admission to our master's program in piano performance, beginning in the fall semester." Maya read the sentence 3 times before she believed it was real. Acceptance. They wanted her. They thought she was good enough. Over the next few days, 2 more letters arrived. Both acceptances. All 3 conservatories wanted her. She had succeeded beyond her wildest hopes. She met with Richard Chen to tell him the news. His office felt familiar now, less intimidating than it had during that first visit. He smiled broadly when she showed him the acceptance letters, and for a moment he looked younger, less burdened by the weight of his business empire. "My mother would have been so happy," he said quietly. "She always believed that talent combined with opportunity could change lives. You're proving her right." Maya chose the conservatory in the city. Boston and New York were appealing, but something about staying close to where this journey began felt right. She would be near Elena, who had agreed to continue teaching her. She would be near Richard, whose generosity had made everything possible. And she would be near the restaurant where she had played that one night and changed her entire destiny. The months before the semester began were busy with preparations. Richard's scholarship covered tuition, books, living expenses, and even provided her with a small stipend for personal needs. For the first time since her mother died, Maya didn't have to worry about money. She could focus entirely on music. She gave notice at the restaurant. Mr. Roberts threw her a small party on her last shift, and the other staff members signed a card wishing her success. Even some of the regular customers had heard about her story and came to congratulate her. On her final night working there, Patricia Hartwell, the woman in the red dress from that fateful evening, arrived with a gift. It was a beautiful leather portfolio for carrying sheet music, expensive and elegant. "I want you to know something," Patricia said. "That night when you played, you reminded me of who I used to be before I gave up my art for what seemed like practical reasons. I've started painting again because of you. My family thinks I'm crazy, but I don't care. You showed me it's never too late to reclaim the parts of ourselves we lost." Maya hugged her, both of them crying a little. She realized that her music had rippled outward in ways she never expected, touching lives and changing perspectives beyond just her own transformation. When fall arrived, Maya walked through the conservatory gates for the first time as a student. The building was beautiful, designed specifically for music with practice rooms and performance spaces and a library full of scores from every era of classical music. She was surrounded by other talented musicians, all of them passionate and dedicated. The work was demanding even more than she expected. The program pushed her technically and artistically, challenged her assumptions and forced her to grow in uncomfortable ways. But she had learned to embrace discomfort as a sign of growth rather than a warning of failure. In her second year, she was selected to perform a solo recital. The night of the performance, she stood backstage looking out at the filled auditorium. Elena was in the audience, as was Richard Chen and his son David. Mr. Roberts had come and several other people from the restaurant. Patricia Hartwell sat in the third row, beaming with pride. Maya walked onto the stage to warm applause. She sat at the piano, looked at the keys that had become like old friends, and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Not just for the opportunity she had been given, but for every experience that had led her to this moment. The losses and the struggles had made her music deeper, more honest, more meaningful. She began to play. The notes filled the hall, rising up to the ceiling and washing over the audience like light. She played for her mother, who had planted the seed of this talent. For Richard's mother, whose dying wish had made this possible. For Elena, who had taught her discipline and artistry. For Richard himself, who had seen potential where others saw only a waitress, but mostly she played for herself. For the girl who had refused to let circumstances destroy her dreams completely. For the young woman who had found the courage to accept help when it was offered. For the musician she was becoming, learning to transform pain and joy alike into something beautiful. When the recital ended, the audience rose to its feet. Maya stood and bowed, letting the applause wash over her. She saw Richard Chen in the crowd, tears streaming down his face just as they had that first night. She saw Elena nodding with approval. She saw all the people who had believed in her when she struggled to believe in herself. After the performance, Richard approached her backstage. He held out his hand formally, but his smile was warm. "My mother would have loved your playing tonight. Thank you for honoring her memory so beautifully." "Thank you for giving me the chance," Maya replied. "You changed my life." "No," Richard said gently. "You changed your own life. I just opened a door. You're the one who had the courage to walk through it." Years later, Maya would remember that night as the moment she finally understood what her mother had tried to teach her. That music wasn't just about technical skill or perfect performances. It was about truth, connection, and the courage to share your authentic self with the world. It was about transforming pain into beauty, loss into art, struggle into triumph. She had been asked to play as a joke, but her performance had moved even a billionaire to tears and changed multiple lives in the process. Sometimes the most important moments in life came disguised as ordinary ones. Sometimes a single evening could redirect the entire course of a future. Sometimes all it took was the willingness to sit down at a piano and play with your whole heart, trusting that honesty would matter more than perfection. Maya graduated with honors and went on to perform professionally, teach and eventually establish a foundation to help other young musicians from difficult circumstances. She never forgot where she came from or the unlikely chain of events that had rescued her dreams from obscurity. And whenever she played, she poured everything into the music, knowing that somewhere in the audience might be someone who needed to hear it, someone whose life might be changed by the simple act of authentic expression. The piano keys remained her voice, her truth, her way of connecting with a world that was sometimes cruel and often beautiful. And she played them with gratitude and joy for the rest of her life,